right, good evening, everyone. How you doing? Good, wonderful. Well, welcome to the Corning Museum of Glass and our hot glass demonstration, a special demonstration today. We have a visiting artist. We have Catherine Labonté here, and she will be making an adorable glass hedgehog, just like the one you see down here. But let me get started by introducing the team. Of course, first, we do have Catherine Labonté over there on the right bench in the blue shirt. She will be the gaffer. She's the designer. She's in charge. She's running the show. Let's give her a big round of applause. Thank you so much. Of course, she's here with a team. She brought along with her David and Charlie. They will be assisting. They've been already hard at work getting some parts prepared for this demonstration to speed up some of the smaller, tedious tasks and components. And then, of course, we have our Corning Museum of Glass team as well, here to lend a hand as needed. So we've got Katie Hubbs, we've got Jesse Rassid. Of course, we've got our wonderful AV team. We've got Brad on the camera. In the booth, we've got Jason and Alexis, and they'll probably do some switching as well. Amanda running the live stream and all of our communications through the internet, because this is a live streamed demonstration. And then my name is Michael Beam. I'm here for you. I'll explain the process and answer questions. So we've got a lot of people here on the floor. I say we give them all a nice warm welcome as they get started. Also, fantastic. So she is here, Kat is here, making this adorable little hedgehog, and that is part of our annual Adopt a Glass Pet event that we have. So Kat is known for making these adorable little glass creatures and critters, and they come in varying sizes. Of course, she's making a big one here for this demonstration, but earlier today they had an Adopt a Glass Pet event, so you can get one of Kat's glass pets, and I think you get a little bit of paperwork that comes with it that says, that you adopted a glass pet. It's really fun and very cute. So, of course, this is a big weekend for us here in Corning in general. This is Glass Fest weekend, so we have a lot of events happening around the museum and around the town on Market Street, our little downtown area. We have all kinds of food and vendors and food trucks set up, live music all weekend long, and, of course, a big fireworks show tonight. So it's a very exciting weekend here for us in Corning, and we're excited to have Kat here as part of that, making an adorable glass creature. So they have been hard at work making some of the prep work. Now, this is a long process. We have about 90 minutes to get this piece assembled and all put together and created. But there's been probably an hour, at least an hour and a half probably, of work already into this piece, not counting the planning. On the far right side of the stage, we have an oven there, and we call that oven the garage kiln. We call it the garage because we can make parts and components, we can make pieces, and we can park them in the garage. We can store them there at a comfortable temperature. Glassmaking is so much about temperature control, temperature management. So we have this working window. When we get glass fresh out of the furnace, it's 2,100 degrees Fahrenheit. And then we can work with it as long as it's soft. And once it cools down to maybe 1,300 degrees, it starts to set up and become rigid. And around 1,000 degrees, we know that it's definitely rigid and we can't change the shape anymore. Then we're worried about temperatures really below 1,000 degrees, because as the glass cools, as the glass heats, it will expand and contract. And that does happen on a small scale, but it's enough that if the glass cools too much, it can crack and break. So glassmaking, very much about temperature management. So our garage kiln, we can make different pieces. We can put them into that garage and store them right around 1,000 degrees. And that's a comfortable temperature where we don't have to worry that the glass will cool too much and break, but we also aren't worried about it being so warm that it will change its shape, it will distort. So they've been making pieces so that in the later stages of the process, we can start to assemble this and it can all go really smoothly and really seamlessly. So glassmaking is also about planning, and I've worked with a lot of glass makers. I would say that Kat is one of the better planners that I've ever worked with, because she has a drawing over here on the side of the stage, and it's actually more like a blueprint because she has the scale, she has the sizes of everything measured out, she has the order of operations, she also has all of the colors listed on the side as well. So immense planning has gone into this piece, and that drawing, that's a drawing that, of course, she made. She illustrated that. She said that she illustrated that on the iPad, and it gives it a great effect. It comes out super clean, and obviously you can scale that and print it on the big paper. So we've got this wonderful illustration, and one of my favorite parts is that on the far right side there's a view of what the hedgehog looks like from above, and I really like that. Because if you look at the hedgehog vertically, it looks exactly like the drawing. So pretty adorable. But immense planning has gone into this piece. Now, Kat is based in Canada, so she messaged us before she came, and she said, I need these colors because it's difficult to travel with glass color across the border. And we said, yeah, no problem. But glass color comes in a couple different forms. So they're using a lot of color bar, and I'll grab one to show you so you can see what it looks like. We buy our colors from a company, and they make these long rods of glass, and we can cut these into small pieces. We can also use frit, and that's small crushed pieces of glass color. And it's basically this bar that's ground up, and we can roll hot molten glass across these pieces, and we can add color to glass this way. Now the frit, it gives us a really modeled effect to any of the things that we're making, but when we use this color bar, we get a really uniform, really even color application. Anyone that's not a glassblower doesn't know what this is, so I'm sure that it is tricky to travel with this across the border without getting a lot of questions. So she messaged us beforehand and asked about what colors we had so that she could make this piece as well. So again, just more of that planning involved. So it looks like right now they're working on some of the legs. Now again, we've got the measurements, 2.5 inches for the legs. And they all want to be 2.5 inches because anytime you make something that has 4 legs, they all have to be the same height, because if you only have 3 legs touching, or with 4 legs, you can only have 3 legs touching. You can have a tripod, and then you have an animal that kind of wobbles. So making sure those are all the right size, also very important. But for all these little components in that color bar, we can break that color up. We have a chopper that basically just breaks the glass for us. But when Kat got here, we picked up that color bar and we used a tile saw, and we cut that. It's a wet saw. We can cut that color bar into small pieces, really uniform pieces, and that also will impact the density of the piece that we make. So as we stretch the glass color, as we inflate glass color, depending on how much color you use and how far you stretch it, that can impact the actual color. If you stretch it a long ways, it's not going to be as dense, it's not going to be as vibrant. So by cutting all of the glass the same size and then making all the pieces the same size, she knows that she'll have a really uniform color application as well. Now, one of the fun things about this demonstration is that at the end of the demonstration, Kat is going to choose a name for the hedgehog, but she's not going to just name this herself. We will be taking suggestions from the live audience, you all here in our amphitheater. We'll be taking suggestions for names. We will also be taking suggestions from the internet, from the live stream demonstration that's happening. So we'll get all of those suggestions, we'll get them on a list, and then we'll have Kat choose the name at the very end. So this is the 7th time that she's done this, and she's chosen names for other pieces in the past. I know that we had Pierre, our penguin, and Pierre has kind of turned into a mascot here at the museum. So Pierre was the penguin, and there were several other animals. I don't know the names that any of those animals got, but I can tell you what some of the animals Kat has made in the past, because when she comes and does these demonstrations, she's debuting a new animal that she's created each time. So I've got it here: a hippo, an elephant, a rabbit, a penguin, and an octopus. So those are some of the animals that she's made in the past. So of course you can shout out your name suggestions, you can get my attention, I'll make sure those end up on the list, but also if you have questions as we work through the process, I'll be happy to answer any of those as well. But we've got a big team down here, and that's pretty common as you increase the scale and complexity of pieces, because we're going to be assembling this all together. This is a fairly large piece as well. And if you saw any of our demonstrations, our normal standard demonstrations throughout the day, most of those were with 2, maybe 3 glass makers all working together to make one thing. But with a large piece like this, a lot of different components, it is much easier to do this with a team. So I think we're getting ready now to begin the actual body of the hedgehog. David's got a blowpipe here in his hands, and he's using a big blowpipe. We have different size pipes for different size pieces that we want to make. Now this is a pretty big hedgehog. Let me pick this up, see how heavy it is. Well, that's maybe what, 10, 12 pounds? Yeah, probably 8 or 10 or 12 pounds of glass. So 10 or 12 pounds of glass. That blowpipe will be 5 or 6 pounds. And of course, it's not 10 or 12 pounds of glass that you're holding right next to you. It's kind of like if you have a gallon of milk on a shovel. A gallon of milk is 8 pounds. So it's not close to your body. It feels much heavier than really 10 or 12 pounds. So we have bigger pipes. If we want to make something really delicate, we got a fancy little cup here. You wouldn't use that big pipe because it's cumbersome, it's heavy. That pipe, again, maybe 5, 6 pounds. So you don't want to have a big pipe and a little piece. So depending on the scale, you'll change the sizes of your pipes. And because this is going to be big, we've got a bigger pipe, and that means that they're probably getting ready to begin the glass blowing process. So that is a hollow pipe, and he made a little collar on the end. So he basically collected some clear glass, blew through it, so there's just a little ring of glass, and he picked up, I think, some color right on the end. Now, I'm here for you, I'm explaining the process. So I didn't talk with them about the exact order that this will happen, so there will be some parts where we're all surprised together. But I'll be able to figure it out as I look and see and peek what's happening. Yeah, it looks like they've got some color. So you can see on the hedgehog that we have here on the stage, it is orange and pink. And there's a good illustration on the drawing as well of how that color is pushed onto a bubble. So you get this kind of swooping line so that the orange is a little more prominent on one side and the pink is more prominent on the other side. So I think that that color they just picked up is already kind of organized and situated in that way. So the color, that does usually happen at the beginning as well. And with a piece like this, there's a good amount of clear glass around the outside. That color is more expensive than clear glass. Clear glass is maybe about $1 a pound. But depending on the colors, they can change and vary in value drastically. And that's dependent upon what goes into them. So first, let me talk about our clear glass. We're using a type of glass called soda lime glass, and it's really the most common kind of glass in the world. It's what you encounter and interact with every single day. Bottles, windows, jars, it's all soda lime glass. So silica, sand, that's the main ingredient for glass. You've probably all heard at some point that sand is the main ingredient in glass, or that glass comes from sand. So silica, that's the base. We also have soda ash as a flux, helps the glass melt at a lower temperature. Then we also have limestone, and the limestone is a stabilizer. So the limestone is important because without it, the glass can actually break down over time. Humidity in the air can eat away at the surface of the glass. So soda lime glass, that's what we start with. But if we want to change the color, we add different metal oxides and chlorides, elements from the periodic table. So green glass, for example, is made with iron oxide. Has anyone heard of cobalt blue? Do you have any guesses as to what metal goes into make cobalt blue? Cobalt, yeah. What about copper blue? It's a lighter blue. Any guesses what metal goes in copper blue? Copper. All right, what about this one? This one's a tricky one. Salmon pink. Gold. Someone's been to a show, or they know about glass. Gold chloride makes pink glass. So our green glass, it's iron oxide, basically rust. That could be $30, $35 for 1 kilo of glass. It comes from a company in Germany, so they send it to us by the kilo. About 2 pounds, $30. But the pink glass with gold, it's closer to $80 or $90 for the same amount. So that value changes wildly. So the color typically happens early on in the process. It happens when the piece is still very small. Because it's formulated to be dense, it will stretch and it will go a long ways. So we can use a small amount of it and it will stretch and go a long, long ways. So the color also is usually one of the longest parts of the process as we start things in the beginning. And we have hundreds of different ways to color glass and to get different patterns on the surface of glass. And this one is fairly simple, but it still does take a long time. Because of course this is small, it's still the beginning, so it's kind of the foundation. So we're building the entire hedgehog off of this bubble and off of this color pattern and color design. So we want it to all be perfect. So they're getting the colors shaped up on the end of the blowpipe. So far, you've been here, we're 15 minutes in, you've seen no glass blowing. don't worry, there it is. Glass blower blows glass. Oh, the paws were blown. Okay. So the legs, or the paws, they were blown. So if you're watching closely, you maybe saw glass blowing, but there is definitive glass blowing. Blowing through the pipe, trapping the air with our thumb. That air is pressurized. It will expand with the heat and force its way into the soft glass on the end of the pipe. So with the color, it is tough to see, but what we're looking for is to see that glass start to move and start to expand. And that's how we know that there is a bubble in there, even though we can't see it. So a little bit of glass blowing. So we call that a blow and cap. When we blow through the pipe, cap the end with our thumb, and that air expands into the bubble. And we do that because when we blow into the pipe, you've maybe seen the signature pose of a glassmaker where they've got the pipe up to their mouth and they're blowing through the pipe and the glass is 4 feet away on the end of the pipe. You can't really see what's happening. So if we blow through the pipe, we trap that air with our thumb, then we can slide the pipe much closer to us and see exactly what's going on with the color or the bubble. So David's going to let this cool down. He'll probably go back to the furnace and start gathering more clear glass. So that soda lime glass I was telling you about, there are different recipes. There are different compositions. And depending on the percentages of those different ingredients you have, that changes the working properties. And I'm not sure, I forget which glass they said they're melting in their furnace in Canada, but they're melting a different type of glass or a different brand, essentially, of glass than what we're using here. So when they showed up today, we were talking about the different properties of glass. And David was saying that last time he was here, he thought the glass had cooled down, and the glass was actually still very hot. So when he gathered that next layer of glass, and he collected clear glass on the surface, that interior core was still really warm. And so the glass started to get pretty soft and wiggly very quickly. So we describe the glass as being maybe long or short, and we're describing the working time, how long it stays hot. And depending on those types of glass or the properties, it changes how you work. So we were discussing that at the beginning of the day, what the properties of our glass are, just so that they're not going to be so surprised. But the glass that we're using is no longer being made. So we've been testing all these other different types of glass. So we have a big melting furnace in the center of the stage, and that's the heartbeat of the operation. But on the left side of the stage, we have a small furnace, and that little furnace over there holds maybe 80 pounds or 100 pounds of glass. We've been melting all these different other types of glass, these other clear glasses, to see what the working properties are and to see how we like them, to figure out what type of glass we'll change to next. But it's an interesting conversation to have with other glass makers of what they think of each type of glass and what the properties are, whether it's really good for sculpting or maybe making something like a goblet. We also, in that small furnace, will sometimes melt colored glass in there. So in our furnace that holds 1,000 pounds of glass, we just melt clear glass, and then we can add whatever color we want. Those colors I was showing you, we have nearly 200 different options to choose from of different colors. You have pretty much the spectrum of the rainbow. You have different shades and tones of different colors. And then you have your whites and your grays and your browns, your neutrals. So we have a lot of different colors to choose from, but every once in a while, we'll melt a color pot. So it's a pure color pot, and everything that you gather out of that furnace will be that color. And we never do that in our 1,000-pound furnace, because if we melted that copper blue glass, for example, in our furnace, we would make only 1,000 pounds of blue glass. And people love blue glass, but I think we would get very bored of only making blue things. So right now we're just going through this basically layering process, collecting multiple layers of clear glass, and that's what we have to do. We have to build that glass up in layers, just because at 2,100 degrees, the glass is very runny. It can't support its own weight. It just drips and flows. It would run right off the end of the pipe and onto the floor. So we let this bubble cool down before we go back to the furnace. And again, thinking about those different properties, if this glass stays hot a little longer than what they're used to, giving it a little extra time to cool.
Megan was wondering if anyone in the audience had more name suggestions.
So we were getting in some suggestions on the internet of names for the hedgehog. Said that the French word for hedgehog is hérisson. Am I saying that anywhere close to right? They're not listening. Hérisson. And so someone suggested Harrison Ford. It's also been Spike. That was a suggestion. I see your hand. I'll come get your suggestion. We'll add it to the list. Yeah. Shark. Shark. Add it to the list. That's going to confuse somebody. You know what? All right. I'll start down here. You raise your hand. I'll just work my way up. All right. What's your name suggestion? Jay? I like that. Jay. Yeah. Jerry. We're in the J's. Les Picous. Spike in French. You know, they have that written on the illustration. So, Picous. Did you know that or did you Google it? Oh, Googled it. You know, I took French in school also. I don't remember much at all. Yeah. I won't tell my French teacher, and I don't think she'll watch. Do you have a name? Holly? Holly. That's a good one. Yeah? Nala. Ooh, Lion King, right? Nala, like that. Nala. Yes. Sonic, of course. Sonic. I don't think we can name it Sonic. I think there's probably some licensing issues there, but again, I'm not choosing. Ujak? Ijan? Jacques. Ijak. Ijak. That's Ukrainian for hedgehog. Spelling? You're going to have to guess. Yeah, you have to guess. Yeah, have Amanda look it up. Yeah. Ijak. Yes. Aurora for the gold. Fancy taste. Yes. Nelly. All right. We got Nelly. We got Nala. Maya. Stuart. Am I going too fast? I should probably slow down. No? Okay. So Stuart, that was the last one. I'll come around to the other side. I think this is the first time I've ever come all the way to the back of the amphitheater during a demonstration. It's kind of strange. I can hear myself quite well. Yeah. Seinfeld. Again, I think we're going to have some licensing issues, but we'll write it down. You know, we also got Jerry. We got the suggestion Jerry. So we got Jerry and we got Seinfeld. Yes. Gertrude? Gertrude. Yeah. Nosheen. What does that mean something? Oh, after you. Do you feel slighted because he didn't suggest your name? Noreen? Okay. Nosheen. I like Noreen Nosheen. Yeah, it really rolls. Yeah. Asahina? Asahina. You're going to have to guess on the spelling of that one, too. Yeah. Oh, so there's that I'll just sit down. There's that second color going on. So I was incorrect earlier. There was just one color. It looks like there might have been two, but there is just one color. You can see they heated the second bit of color bar, and they dropped it onto the top. And then they used our steel table, the marver, in the center of the stage to push that color down around the sides. And pushing it really only on one side. So if we want to make a really uniform color application, typically we put that color right on the top, right in the center, and we push and we work the color down really evenly. So they're working on that now, and they're going to push that color in, that second color in, and make sure that it's perfectly smooth. If we go back to the furnace and we gather more glass and we have a ridge or a bump between those two layers of color, what will happen is we'll trap an air bubble. Now, air bubbles aren't going to really change or ruin the structural integrity, but for this piece, it's not going to be really match the aesthetic that we want. So it's more about the visual as opposed to the strength. Yeah. Hans. Ooh, Hans. I like that. We got Hans. Yes. Spiky. Megan, we got Spiky. That's a new name suggestion. Got some more. And after this round, we'll do some more names later. Okay? So we'll take a break after this round. So I'll get this round, and then we'll come back to names in a bit. Yeah. Duke. Duke. And Herbert. Nico. Duke, Herbert, Nico. Make sure we got those. Got Duke, Herbert, and Nico. Yeah. Herbert the Hedgehog. I wonder if you have to say, is that like the full name? The Hedgehog. So it's like the name and the hedgehog. Yeah. Do you get a name? Oh, I thought you were raising your hand at me. Were you waving at me? There's someone else. Francois. You like Francois? Okay. Well, you probably have more sway in the decision. Maybe you can nudge Kat in that direction. Francois? Yeah. Am I allowed to make a suggestion? Can I make a name suggestion? I'm going to. I'm just not going to tell him that I said it. I'll just pretend someone else. Jesse, you want to suggest your own name? Great. I would like to suggest Hedgeward. It's like Edward, but Hedgeward. Like a hedgehog. Hedgeward. Like a hedgehog. And Edward. Edgar. Yep. This is fun. Yeah. Heathcliff. Like Huxtable? Right? Wasn't that the character from the Cosby Show? We got one more. Heathcliff. All right, we'll come back to the names in a little bit. Does anyone have any questions about the process or glass or what you're seeing or the museum? No? All right, great. Let me know if you do. So we've got the color on. You can really see the difference in the color now, how that color was wound or pushed down on one side. So they're going to go back for more glass, and they'll probably go back for more glass at least a couple times. But right now they're cooling off the pipe, and you can see steam coming off of that pipe. We do like to use stainless steel pipes here in the glass studio, and the stainless steel is a relatively poor conductor of heat as far as metals go. So we can have 2,100 degree glass on the end of the pipe, and we can comfortably handle the pipe in the center. But you may be able to see there is tarnishing that happens that works down the end of the pipe. That pipe is sort of turning brown where the heat travels up the pipe. So that's a good visual clue for us, a good visual indicator for the heat, where the heat is traveling up the pipe. But every once in a while, when we're working on a piece for a very long time, the heat will start to work its way up. And so we use that pipe cooler to cool it off so that we can handle the pipe comfortably. The closer you can hang onto the pipe to the glass, the more control you're going to have. So we like to cool that pipe off, and cooling it off before going into the furnace to gather helps as well. Because as the level in the furnace gets lower, we have to put the pipe further in. And the further in the furnace is, the further in the pipe the furnace is, the further in the furnace the pipe is, there we go, it's going to get hot. So cooling off the pipe a little bit beforehand, and we'll sometimes do that after the gather as well. But considerably more glass now on the end of the pipe. Because of that increased surface area, every time we collect glass from this point on, we'll get more and more material. My mom suggested Henri. Hello, Mom. Henri. Yeah, thanks. I'm glad you told me. Henri? 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 Oh, I can't do that. Yeah. There's a roll of the R there I don't feel I'm capable of. But yeah, considerably more glass, but still not quite as much as what we'll need. Now, we do have an animation. Can we roll the animation on our TV screens so that everybody can see what it looks like in the furnace? This is a great animation, a cutaway of what it would look like inside the furnace when we collect glass. So that furnace here, again, it holds 1,000 pounds of glass, and it all just sits in a big ceramic bowl. and we push the pipe, we push the glass underneath the surface of the glass that sits in there, and we turn and we spool the additional layers on. So once we get to a larger amount of glass, we can control a little bit how much material we're getting out, depending on the angle that we kind of enter and exit the furnace with. So we can almost push the pipe and the glass across the top, across the surface, and we can kind of scoop more material out if we want to get a whole bunch of glass out in one collection. Or if we want to not have a whole bunch of glass, we can pull the pipe out backwards at an angle, and we can let some of the glass run off the end of the pipe. And every once in a while, we'll also pull the pipe out of the furnace, go straight up and down, and we'll let that glass drip right off the end of the bubble into a bucket of water. We call that a strip gather, and it allows us to control really well and really carefully how much glass we have on the end of the pipe. So you see them doing some shaping with this glass and a little bit of inflating. And the shaping is happening with a couple different tools, but the tool in David's hand right now is just newspaper. It's about 7 to 10 sheets of newspaper, and that's one of our favorite tools. Because obviously, 2,000-degree glass, you can't touch it with your hands, and a lot of artists and makers want to use their hands. And the glass, or the newspaper, gives us the ability to come in close proximity to the material and really shape the glass with our hand. So 7 to 10 sheets of newspaper, we fold it up in thirds again, and we soak it in water. And the water is what allows us to be able to use that tool anyways. So all of the water, it's turning to steam, and the glass will ride on a little layer of steam within that tool. So the newspaper, depending on how thick it is and how well we treat it, and depending on the newspaper as well, we can use it for sometimes a few days, sometimes maybe a week, maybe even 2 weeks, before it kind of falls apart. So it does tend to just fall apart eventually or tear at the kind of crease that develops with how we hold the newspaper. It'll get a crease and it will tear, and then that steam will actually shoot through the crease kind of towards your hand, and you know very quickly then that it's time for a new newspaper. But different people have different preferences for the newspaper as well. I know some people are particular about which newspapers they use for maybe the ink content, or if there's a lot of colored ink in the newsprint, but I don't think it really matters so much. What happens is that newspaper burns and you get this black carbon buildup on the surface anyways. So that also helps the glass slide on the surface as well. So the first couple days that you use a newspaper, or the first couple times you use a newspaper, you get a lot of smoke coming off of that. And usually when you leave, I find that oftentimes I'll leave the glass studio, I'll smell more like a campfire from that newspaper tool than I will sweaty glass blower, which is, I think people appreciate, rather smell campfire smell. But they've also gotten out a wooden scoop. We call that a block. It's carved from a block of wood, and the wood we like to use is fruit wood. We like to use fruit woods, and we'll shape that fresh glass straight out of the furnace using those wooden scoops. It allows us to shape, center, and cool the glass and distribute that material really evenly around this bubble. And the wood tool, because it's wood, it's more durable than the newspaper, we can use those for a couple years before we have to replace them. But they work the same way, soaked in water, the water turns to steam, and the glass glides on that steam layer. But we're using cherry wood here. We've got cherry wood blocks, but any fruit wood works, so apple, pear, a lot of it just depends on what you have locally in the region. And yeah, the fruit woods are great. They also have such a dense grain pattern, so they hold the water well, and then they also burn out very evenly over time. Something with a softer grain pattern wouldn't burn out nearly as well. Look at that. I hear some oohs and ahs. Look at that. That's so much glass on the end of the pipe. Really nice gather, nicely done. Getting that much furnace, or that much glass out of the furnace, very difficult. Now, the turning, that's critical. Of course, if we stop turning, the glass will run and flow. It'll drip off the end of the pipe. But we also don't want to turn too quickly, because when the glass is so hot, if we turn really fast, it will actually start to spin out really wide. We'll kind of get this big bulge. Almost, it'll start to look kind of like Saturn rings. If we spin really fast, we could fling the glass completely off the end of the pipe. So super slow turning, just turning fast enough to keep the glass centered and on the end of the pipe, not so fast that the glass widens out. So learning how to turn a pipe, it seems so simple. You just have to keep the pipe turning and rolling all the time. But there's not really anything that we do every day that translates into the motor skill or the dexterity of turning something all the time. especially sitting at a bench and turning maybe 15 pounds with one hand. So that is very difficult to do, is to keep that glass turning. And we're also constantly reacting. Glass blowing is a very reactive process. We're reacting and we're adjusting our turning speed dependent upon what the glass is doing. And the glass is always cooling down. So over time, it starts to become kind of second nature. You don't have to think about turning. But if you go to a beginner class and you watch beginning glass makers, whoever's teaching the class, you'll probably hear them just keep saying, turn, keep turning, turn the pipe. Because if you're a beginner, you're a little bit more concerned about not getting burned. You're a little bit freaked out that you have 2,000 degree glass on the end of the pipe. And then you kind of start to do this fishing pole thing, where you pull your hands back far away, and then you kind of hold the glass up higher, and you're not turning, and then the glass is dripping off on the floor. So it's kind of challenging. It's very challenging to learn how to blow glass, and also to just not be so intimidated by glass when you very first start. But we do always get asked, how often do you get burned? And it's not super common, and it's pretty rare that we get burned from the glass. We know that that's hot. We're not going to touch it. What's more likely to happen is like those pipes. The heat will travel up the pipe. Maybe we'll grab the pipe up a little too high or a little too far. But also, you usually only do that once or twice. And at least if you're a quick learner, you usually only do that once or twice. To that tarnished area, we call it the hospital zone between your hand and the glass. And I think I've really only gotten one bad burn from the hospital zone. And it was because I was wearing shorts. And what I did was I was sitting at the bench and I picked my leg up and I touched the pipe and I got a burn across the top of my leg, which was mostly terrible because that's where every pair of pants sort of lands, is right where that burn was. But you know what? I only did it once, and I still wear shorts in the glass studio. So can be a harsh learning curve sometimes, or a harsh lesson, but we're very careful. We also have a couple of rules, like assume everything is hot. That's a good rule. And also, one of the rules is the person with the glass has the right of way. That way you avoid incidents walking into each other. A glass studio is also a lot like a kitchen. So if you hear somebody walking, they'll usually say, I'm behind you, or I'm next to you, I'm on your left, I'm on your right, just so that if you're turning or you're moving in the glass studio, you're not going to run into each other. We also have different safety equipment. For the most part, shorts and short sleeves, that's fine, but David also has a sleeve on his arm, and that's just to protect him from some of that radiant heat that's coming off of that glass. Because again, that glass, it's probably close to 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's like trying to do something very close over a campfire, probably be a comparable situation. So we put those sleeves on sometimes just to protect us from that radiant heat. We also wear closed-toed shoes and eye protection. Those things are important. Sometimes you'll see us as glassmakers wear dark lenses or tinted lenses, didymium lenses. It's kind of a purple lens, helps with some of the brightness from the glass. But this is an important step. They were torching that glass. You saw them using that big hand torch, that big fluffy torch, as we often call it. And that torch was to focus heat on the glass right next to the blowpipe, because they need to create a constriction just off the end of the pipe. That constriction, that's how they'll remove this hedgehog from the pipe later on in the process. So that little crease, that narrow area that they're creating in the glass, it's like the thin line in a chocolate bar, right? That thin area in the chocolate, that crease tells the chocolate where to break. This is going to tell our glass where to break later on. So we need to make that constriction pretty early on before we really blow the glass up too much, because once it's inflated, it's very difficult to go back, get the glass hot enough to squeeze in that narrow line. So we call it the neckline or the jack line. Typically we call it the jack line, and we call it that because those metal tools that he was using, those are the jacks. So we squeeze the glass with the jacks. You see he's also preheating those jacks. We lubricate those tools with beeswax. Hot glass sticks to other hot things. That's what's keeping the glass on the end of the pipe anyways. We preheat the pipes to get the glass out of the furnace. So hot glass sticks to other hot things. It will stick to itself, but we don't want the glass to stick to those metal tools. So the beeswax allows the glass to just slide and glide on the surface of the glass, or on the surface of the tool, really gently. So every once in a while you'll see smoke, or sometimes you'll see a little fireball come off of those metal tools, and it's not the glass, it's not the steel, it's just the beeswax. It's also one of the better smells in the glass studio. Speaking of smells in the glass studio, the beeswax is a nice kind of sweetness when it burns. So Kat is what we call the gaffer. So she's in charge. She's leading the team. And she's got the caliper measurements. So she has all the measurements on her illustration for what she wants to make. So she's got the caliper measurements set to that size. And then she's standing there directing the team. Anybody have any questions? No, still good. Yeah, what's your question? Yeah. Are the glass animals still available to buy right now? I hope so. I would like to go look for one myself. But you can go look in the shops. I don't actually know. I would imagine that there are still some. There are still some on display. You're in luck. Yeah, you got to sweet talk mom and dad. But yeah, there are still some. That's great news. So they are available in the shops, and again, varying sizes and different animals. So this is a hedgehog, but Kat makes all kinds of different animals. I know that I've seen little dogs, I've seen little bunnies, little penguins. I'm not sure if they have the hippos and the elephants, but those were on the list, at least, of what I had, or of what Kat has made previously here. Yeah, one of the great things about the museum here and the glass market is that they do such a great job of representing artists, local artists. And all that work gets displayed, and it says, like made locally or made near Corning. And so you have, of course, a world-renowned glass museum to walk through and see thousands of years of glass history, but you can also walk through our glass market and you can see work that's being produced by artists locally or regionally. And you get to see a lot of other incredible work made by glass artists from the area as well as from around the world. So it's cool because it also functions almost like an entirely different gallery from our different galleries and collections here around the museum. Looks like Megan's getting a good shot. Might end up on the museum social media. That's another thing you can do is if you're curious about some of the cool events and projects that we have happening or the things that might be in our market, we've got social media. Obviously, we've got Instagram and Facebook, but the museum and the shops, they have two separate Instagram accounts to highlight different artists and different events and happenings around the museum. Also, we have our extensive YouTube channel. So this demonstration, that's what Brad's doing down here. He's bringing us all these great close-up shots. It's live streamed, so it's being watched currently. But of course, every live stream that we do, after about a week, we try to get those videos up on our YouTube channel. And at the end of the video, we have a picture of the finished piece so that you can see what the end result was. So we have a lot of videos, probably hundreds of hours at this point, of glass videos, great production. And a lot of glassmakers also use those to learn. So that's really the main point, is that we can continue to share glass with people around the world. And it's a great resource and reference for glassmakers to be able to learn more techniques, learn more processes, see a lot of really incredible artists work, and see how they work and how they get to a specific result. I know that I've been blowing glass for about 12 years. I'll still watch our YouTube videos. I'll leave work, I'll go home, I'll watch a YouTube video, and I'll always start out. The plan is always like, I just need to watch, I know the process. Like, I just need to watch 5 minutes so I can see this one technique. And then 4 hours later, I've watched 18 different videos where I've sped through and watched the one little thing that I want to watch. But it's pretty cool to have that as a resource and a reference. But also, if you don't get enough glassmaking, it is hundreds of hours of glassmaking on our YouTube channel. There's also a very exciting Netflix show called Blown Away. So if you are familiar, or if you're not familiar, it's a glass blowing competition show. It's like, Great British Bake Off style. You start with 10 glass makers, and they get a challenge every week, and they have to make a piece of glass. And at the end, somebody gets sent home. It's very dramatic, but it's a lot of fun, and we partner. Excuse me. We partner with the show, so in the finale episode, we send 6 of our glassmakers to assist the 2 finalists. And then when the winner wins, they get to come here and they get to work in this shop with our team to make work for a whole week. So that's another thing you can check out. And if you exit the amphitheater and you turn to the right, from the 2nd season, there are pieces from every contestant that were made on the show. So that's a cool thing. You can go see the pieces in person here. And then you can watch the show. You can say, I've seen that. I've seen that in real life. So this is a good example of some of that teamwork that I was talking about earlier, of expanding the scale of your team as you increase the size of the pieces. So Jesse is helping David turn the pipe, because that's a lot of weight, and when you work on one piece for 90 minutes, it starts to get very heavy and very taxing. So Jesse's turning the pipe. That really eases a lot of the stress and strain on David. Charlie was down there. He was blowing through the pipe. So David was telling him when to blow, and actually how hard or how soft, if he needed more or less pressure to inflate the glass. And then Jesse can turn, and then Kat's there, of course, to make sure it's going according to plan. Now the colors, obviously, they don't look completely true to what they'll be when this glass cools down. And that is just because it's hot. So the clear glass, when it came out of the furnace, it had that bright orange glow. The glass is still glowing. It's emitting that light energy. It's just doing that through the colors. So our colors tend to reflect differently versus what they'll be when the glass cools down. So our oranges and yellows, like what the top of this hedgehog will be, it always kind of looks, it's almost a little bit brown. And the pink is not nearly as vibrant either. Our soft colors, the colors that heat up very quickly, things like blue, purple, green, they heat up really quickly because they absorb the heat fast. It's a little bit like wearing a dark shirt to the beach versus a light shirt to the beach. So those heat up and they'll really glow bright orange. And then when they cool down, they show off their true color pretty well and pretty quickly. Some of the stiff colors, colors like oranges, reds, and yellows, they take longer to heat up, then they cool down faster, and they never look true. So the oranges, they tend to look kind of brown. The reds look very brown, and then they sometimes will almost even look black. So you just have to trust that as this cools, it will have that beautiful, vibrant pink color on the bottom of the hedgehog. So that reheating furnace that they're using as well, where Jesse is now, that reheating furnace, it's just a big chamber of heat. It allows us to focus heat specifically and keep the entire piece of glass hot so that we can work with it really as long as we want to. Like I said, this piece will probably take about 90 minutes. So we can just keep heating the glass and making sure that it's hot and soft and it doesn't crack and break. That reheating furnace doesn't have any glass inside of it. The melting furnace has all of that glass. So the melting furnace, that stays on all the time, 24/7, melting at 2,100 degrees. And our melting furnace, it's been on for about 7.5 years at this point, running straight for about 7.5 years. That reheating furnace, we shut that off at night and we'll turn it back on in the morning. It takes about an hour to warm up. They're focusing the heat on just the end, just the tip of the bubble. And that's going to become the face of this hedgehog. And so they're basically just grabbing and pinching some of the glass and stretching it to a point. If you look at the hedgehog that we've got sitting over there on the table, got an adorable little face, but kind of comes to a point. It's got a nose on the end of the point. And then also my favorite thing about the hedgehog is under the nose, there's an adorable little mouth that's kind of pushed into the glass. So that'll probably happen a little bit later. So as he's pulling that point, I can hear him telling Charlie when to blow, when to stop blowing. if you kind of stretch that glass out a long ways and you're pulling, it can start to almost collapse. It can kind of get these creases in the bubble. So by keeping just a small amount of pressure in the pipe, it prevents that from collapsing. But we don't want to blow this up too much or too thin. We want to maintain some of the thickness. That makes it easier to be sculpting the piece, especially adding all of those points that the hedgehog will get later on. It's important to keep the glass a little bit thicker, because if you blow the glass up too thin, you start adding all these additional bits. Those hot bits, when they go on to make the points, they'll start to heat up the glass, the body of the hedgehog. They can actually start to sink in. It can deform the body a little bit. So keeping some thickness is going to be important as we get further into the process. How we doing here in the studio, the live audience? Still doing good? All right, perfect. Glad to hear it. So that torch that Kat just picked up, that's an oxygen propane torch. That's one of the kind of newer things that we use in the glass studio as far as furnace working goes. And it's not like it's a brand new invention, but glass making over a bench-mounted torch called flame working, that's been using a torch like this for a long time. But to take that torch and bring it into the hot shop, it gives us the ability to really sculpt and focus heat very specifically. So that torch, we can turn it up to nearly 4,000 degrees, mixing oxygen and propane. It's a very hot, very precise flame. So we like that torch a lot. But a lot of the tools that you see us using, I mean, the main advancements that we've had in the glass studio and in the glass world, at least, come from the equipment. A lot of the tools and hand tools, they're still very much the same as what glass makers have used for hundreds, if not thousands of years in the glass studio. So the torch is one that really gives us a lot of precision to heat specifically. So I think this hedgehog just got a nose. So you can see that little bit on the end. I think that's black. And that's one of those soft colors. So it heats up really quickly. It cools down a little slower. It stays hot for a long time. So it had a really bright orange glow. So that really shows off the heat and the temperature in the glass. Now, we're taking these kind of specific heats. They're focusing the heat on just the tip where they were stretching that out. But it's also important to keep the entire thing hot. So every once in a while, or every time Jesse goes back to the reheating furnace, he's putting the glass all the way into the furnace just to maintain the temperature all the way to the back, all the way to where it's connected at the pipe. So put the entire piece all the way in. We call that a flash. And those flashes are short. They're maybe 8, 10 seconds, 6 seconds. The thing is, we don't really count. We're not standing there counting how long the heat is. We're looking at the way that the glass moves, and we're using our experience. Sometimes we don't want the glass to start moving. So we rely on our experience to understand the timing and the temperature in that glass. And that's one of the reasons why glass making takes so long to learn, is because you have to build up that understanding, kind of an internal timer. So it's really years of making glass, but mostly it's years of breaking glass. And that's how you get good. You break glass and you have to figure out, okay, why did that break? How can I prevent it from breaking the same way in the future? And then the next time you do it, you'll break it at the same point in the process. And then maybe next time you'll get one step further in the process and something else will go wrong. So it takes a long time. Kat's been blowing glass for 20 years. She has 20 years of glass making experience. So 20 years of successes and failures, all to rely on to understand what's happening with the material and what has to happen with the material.
I was going to say, trees roll.
But I think we might be getting about to the point where we're going to start adding the points for the hedgehog. The piquant? Was that what it was? Piquant? 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 Picou? The points of the hedgehog. What are they called? What are the points specifically called? Or did you just look up point? Spike. Okay. Oh, Spike Lee. Right. Do you know what the specific name is of the spikes on the back of the hedgehog? Do you know? Quills? Yeah, I don't know. That's sort of what I thought. Somebody said that they didn't think it was quills. Maybe someone on the internet will look it up and tell us. But I think quills is a good guess. I'm not sure. Well, the spikes, the quills, the points. Anyways, those are going on, and those are that nice blue color. And the one that we have here in the shop, it's got 20 spikes. So it'll be 20 different bits. So Kat is going to rely on Charlie here. He's going to make these bits the same every single time. He's going to bring the same amount of glass, the same shape, same size, same temperature. As long as he does that, it's going to make Kat's life a lot easier to also make these match pretty closely. Now, I think one of the interesting things is to watch how she cuts this. She's going to cut these in the same direction every time as well. We have different types of shears. We have a type of shear called a diamond shear, and it closes from 4 sides. It cuts at a diamond aperture. And those cut and leave a really round point. But we also have straight shears. We have duckbill shears. I think she's using the straight shears. But when she cuts the glass with those shears, she's cutting it at an angle that leaves a point. It creates a point when she cuts through the glass. So, pretty clever way to add these points, these spikes on the back of the hedgehog. Now, everything that Kat makes, it's so adorable and cartoony, and glass really naturally lends itself to be that way because it ends up being so round, or it wants to be round. It just is a perfect material to get kind of a adorable cartoony animal. So here come all the points, and this is going to help speed up the process. Katie's going to hop in, and she'll start bringing some of those as well. So she watched Charlie make a couple, and now she can jump in, and she can make them the same way. So in the glass studio, we say that we all kind of speak the same language. We understand the steps, we understand the process, so we can work with glass makers that we've never worked with before. And we can work in harmony, and we can make things together, even though we don't have years of working together, years of practicing different pieces together. So that's really one of the cool things about glassblowing. I've also heard a lot of people say that glassblowing really seems like a dance because there's so much timing involved. And everyone kind of moves sort of at the, simultaneously. Everybody kind of moves together. And there really starts to be a pattern that develops if you watch glass makers. So the glass, it's going pretty much always from the bench to the reheating furnace. Then you have Katie and Charlie coming over from the other furnace. So you kind of get, basically it's like a triangle or sometimes a little rectangle of movement that develops in the studio. So I've heard people say it looks like a dance. That being said, probably don't want to watch me dance, but so this is great. You can really see the difference in temperature. You can really see the difference in heat between that fresh bit, that last spike that they added, next to the other 2 spikes. One is going super bright orange still. It's starting to fade in temperature and in color. And the other 2, they look pretty blue. That color that they're using, that frit that they're using for the spikes, that comes in different sizes. So you can also see on the screen there's some black color as well. And that's a much finer color. That's actually a powder. So the powder kind of have to do more coats, more applications, but it gives you a little bit more of a uniform color application. I think they're doing 2 coats, 2 layers of the blue. And the more coats you have, the more even that color will be when it's all said and done.
No, it's just like
Do we have any more names that we need to add to the list? Anyone think of names? Yeah. Mr. Jerry? Well, you already have Jerry. I think you could just go with Jerry, but if you're trying to be formal, then you call him Mr. Jerry. Or maybe if he's your teacher. Yeah, how come they keep torching right there? They keep torching that one little section. Well, that part that's connected to the pipe, that's the last thing into the reheating furnace, and it's the first thing out of the reheating furnace. So they're just using that torch to focus the heat specifically to make sure that, again, it doesn't get too cold. Because remember what happens if the glass gets too cold? Yeah, it starts breaking. Yeah, so they use the torch to just focus a little bit of heat and maintain temperature up there. Yep, good question. You have a name? Harriet. Oh, that's an adorable name. Harriet. That's good. Yeah. Larry? We got Larry? Larry? We've got Larry. We've got Jerry. We've got Mr. Jerry. Yeah. Corey? Ori? Hori? Or Hattie? That was the second one? Yeah? All right. Hori or Hattie. Hercules the Hedgehog. Hercules. Hercules the Hedgehog. I have a very cool plate that has Hercules on it from when I was a kid. Yeah. Peggy? Peggy. All right. I'm glad that I don't have to choose. I bet there's a long list on the back of that whiteboard over there of names. It's not even a list. It's a cacophony of names. Well, it's a lot of names nonetheless, and I'm glad that I don't have to be the person to choose the name. I think it's good that we don't choose the name ahead of time. You know, it's like if you get a puppy, sometimes you have to live with the puppy for a couple days before you really choose a name. You have to see the puppy. Like, oh, this puppy looks like a Spot. Or an Oliver, or a Casey. Those are the family dogs I got at home. Oliver and Casey. Yes. Rick? It's concise. It's short. It's Rick. Has anybody been counting? How many spikes do we have so far? Do you have a name? Instead of porcupine, porcupink. Porcupink. Yeah. It's a little word play. So is anyone counting? 8? Are you confident in that answer? Yes? All right. That's good. I was going to be disappointed if no one knew how many spikes had been applied. I didn't look on the drawing to see if there were 20. Let's see. There are? Yep. I should have known. With a drawing that precise, it's got to match. A lot of glass blowers will just do a really rough sketch, and they'll just tell the team that they're working with. You know, they'll show them a really rough sketch, or sometimes I've seen glass makers just sort of like describe what they're going to make, or maybe use their hands to illustrate a form. But usually it's not, you know, a lot of glass makers, if they're just making a vessel, they don't have to make a drawing. They know what it's going to be, and they know what the steps in the process is. I'm not very good at drawing, so I don't usually draw what I'm going to make. I can usually make what I want to make better than I can draw what I'm going to make. And also, I can make what I'm going to make much more even, typically, than when I try and draw it. You know, you try and make a drawing of a really uniform vessel, you're always going to have one side that doesn't match at all. but you can just make it, and we can almost say that it's like sketching. You can work through a process, or you'll practice a process, or you'll practice a new piece in clear before you start using that expensive color. And we kind of just say that it's like sketching. It's like sketching in glass. You can work through the process very quickly.
Like 1 foot or
Like, yeah, foot and a half.
Now, I'll tell you what, every time they put on one of those extra spikes, it's not very big and it's not a lot of glass, but it's getting heavier every single time they put one of those bits on there. So one thing that you maybe notice Kat doing is when she puts that bit on, she uses that metal paddle, call it a tag, and she kind of cools the tip. Because if that tip is still really hot when we go into the reheating furnace, it's not going to maintain sort of that sharp point. It's going to heat up really quickly, and glass naturally just wants to ball up and be smooth. So those heats, those flashes, they are really short, and we do that after, of course, cooling that tip a little bit just to maintain that point so that it doesn't get too soft or too round. It looks really cool, that view in the reheating furnace. It's pretty cool to see the front of the hedgehog. You can see the mouth that they put in under the nose as well. And it's only going to get better once they put the ears and the eyes and the legs on. It's going to look like it's coming at you every single time they go take a short heat, every time they take a flash. That view in the furnace, it's really unique to us here in Corning. It's not because we have some fancy camera that can go into our 2,100 degree furnace, but we do have a window at the back of the furnace, and it's a specialty glass. So Corning, it's a glass town, obviously. Corning Incorporated, they invented this type of glass called fused silica in 1934. And at the time, they didn't really have any use for it. They knew some of the properties. Depending on what you do to the glass, it changes the properties, and what you make the glass with changes the properties. So they knew the properties of this glass. It was very, very clear, and it was also very resistant to high temperatures. But there was no use for it, so they just kind of put it on the shelf. But years later, a small organization called NASA came along, and they were looking for glass that could be windows for their spacecraft. So that fused silica glass was used for the Mercury, Apollo, the space shuttle missions. Every manned spaceflight that NASA operated, they used some of that fused silica glass. And that's actually made at a factory in Canton, New York. They've got a plant there. And we went and we did some glass blowing at that plant, and it was pretty cool. We have a mobile glass blowing studio. So we took our mobile glass blowing studio to Canton, and we did some glass making. And it was really cool because everyone that worked at that plant, they have a much different idea of glass and how glass operates and how glass can be used and how it functions from what we do. So it was really cool to get to talk to everyone at the plant and learn from each other. But they had a table in their foyer, and it was just sort of a weird shaped coffee table, and I was kind of staring at it and I was like, this is a unique table. And the plant manager was like, oh, that's a space shuttle window. So they built the wood frame for the table around the glass window that was a space shuttle window. It's like, okay, that's cool. Casual space shuttle window table. But it's very cool, very optically clear glass. It's also the same glass used for the core of optical fiber. So the way that we're communicating and sending text messages, making phone calls, binging those Netflix shows, that's all through glass fiber, optical fiber. This fused silica, it was invented here all the way back in the 30s. So it's pretty cool that glass that was invented so long ago still has really revolutionized how we live today. That glass also was used for the James Webb telescope that was launched in 2021. But because of that, because of our affiliation with Corning Incorporated, we get that great view inside the reheating furnace. So remember, after all the spikes are done, that's when we'll start to put on the legs and the eyes and the ears. But those components are all already made, so that part should go fairly quickly, assembling those. So those are all over there in the garage kiln still on the far right, sitting at a comfortable 1,020 degrees Fahrenheit. I believe that's what we have our garage set at. We can also use a different oven. We have an oven called a pickup box, and we're not using that today, but it's a smaller oven over here, kind of back to the left behind the bench. And we can do the same thing with that pickup oven. We can make different parts and components and store them in that pickup box or that pickup oven, and we can control the temperature really well. There's a touch screen on it, so we can change the temperature, and it will come up. It's just like an oven at home, only it goes to over 1,000 degrees. We could make a pizza in there pretty quick if we wanted. There's a fun tradition kind of in glass making where you do cook in the glass studio. A lot of people use those little like Bialetti, those little mocha pots. You can take glass straight out of the furnace, drip it on the steel table, the marver, and you put your coffee pot right on there, and it heats the water and brews your coffee. I've seen that fairly frequently. It's also an expensive way to make a coffee. All you have to do is have access to a glass studio. Most glass blowers do not have their own glass studios. You could maybe guess, if you look at all of this equipment, it's expensive to have your own glass studio. But Kat said she opened a glass studio, her own glass studio, just last year, which is very awesome. It's very exciting. And also, for her, I'm sure it's very stressful, because once you turn on that furnace, you're also kind of very committed to that furnace, making sure that it maintains its temperature all the time, making sure that you don't have a power outage or some kind of issue that can cool all of the glass that stays in that furnace. So it's not very common that glass makers will have their own studios, but when you can have your own studio, that's a really incredible opportunity. So most of us here, a lot of the glass blowers in Corning, just across the parking lot, we have the studio at the Corning Museum of Glass, and it's our educational facility. And we're just about to ramp up into the busy season over at the studio because we have artists and instructors come from all around the world to teach and take classes there. Some of them are weekend classes. Some of them are week-long intensive classes. Some of them are 2-week-long intensive classes. But we have artists come from all around the world to work there. And in the summer, it's very busy. It's tough to get over there and make your own work. So a lot of us that live here in Corning, in the winter, we're very busy because we rent that studio. So you can rent time in that studio, and then you can make whatever work you want to make. And we hire each other. That's the great thing about this community as well, is that there are a lot of glass blowers here, and we're all friends. We all hang out. So we work with our friends to make cool stuff. That's kind of what glass blowing is, in my opinion. Working with your friends to make cool stuff. But we'll all rent time and stay busy in the winter. It's also the best place to be in the winter in New York, is in the glass studio. Nice, comfortable in there. But we'll all work together and rent time and make work. But that's also something that you have to consider. If you look at a piece of glass and you think, oh boy, this is kind of expensive, you have to consider what goes into making that piece of glass. First, you have the skill and the experience of the glass maker. So in Kat's case, 20 years of glass making experience. I'm not sure how long David and Charlie have been blowing glass, but probably at least 6 years apiece. If not, I'd say that's probably on the low end. But you have first just your own time, your own skill, the years that you've poured into becoming a glass maker. Then you have the rental fee, and then you have to pay your assistant. You want to get paid, you have to pay for those colors. So all of those things kind of weigh into how much glass costs. So it's very expensive, but also you're getting a really unique, beautiful, one-of-a-kind piece that has required a lot of skill, a lot of energy, and a lot of effort. So Kat's focusing some heat now again. She's got that oxygen propane torch, focusing heat on the face. And David's over there. He's got some of those components out of the garage. So we have these on a little metal plate. We call it pastorelli. Got these components on a little metal plate, and he goes to the reheating furnace over there, and he's just taking a short heat on that to make sure that it's a cozy, comfortable temperature. But he'll bring this over, and Kat's got some gloves. She's going to just grab this piece, and she'll stick it right on. So it's an eyeball, so she just grabs the eyeball and sticks it right on to the face. Now, I can't wait for this. This is going to be the view in the furnace. Oh, it's so cute. Right now, it's a cyclop. I think the term is cyclops, but the S would imply that it's plural, right? I think this is one cyclop, one eye, one hedgehog. But an adorable little eyeball. So Kat was saying that she used to do this. We have metal tongs. We can use these tongs, and we can grab glass, and we can grab the components. We can stick them together. But you have to preheat the tongs. You don't want the tongs to cool the glass and shock the glass and break the glass. And also, it's a little precarious. It's like a little 3-prong tong that you grab the glass with. She said that she switched to using the gloves. It's just far more precise. She can grab the glass and just use her hand, just stick it right on there. So the gloves that we use, they're usually like a Kevlar or a Kevlar Nomex blend. And it's kind of like a firefighting suit, or what lines a firefighting suit. So we can grab onto that 1,000-degree glass comfortably for maybe a minute before it starts to get warm or a little uncomfortable. But of course, we just want to grab that eyeball, get it on there, and get back into the heat. That little smile is just the cutest dang part of the whole thing. So she's focusing the heat on that eyeball. Now look at how they do this. They switch vertically. So they work on torching from the bottom, and then they work on torching from the top. So they're doing this 180 flip. And that's because as they're taking those heats, those flashes, if the glass is moving, that way it's just moving sort of vertically, and they can kind of time out when they put the eyeball on. So if it's moving, you can slap the eyeball on, and if it's moving, you can kind of push it back onto center when you push the eyeball on. Because it's easier if you keep everything on center, as we say. We keep everything rotating around a singular point in the center. Now this is going to be a little bit weird. You can tell when they turn, if you watch closely, sometimes the glass, it's sort of like when you get to the spike side, you're kind of preventing it from falling because it's heavier on that side. So as you turn, it's like having a flat spot on the wheel of your shopping cart. You know, there's like one spot that's just a little bit harder to get over every time. The same thing when you change the weight and you change the center of gravity on the piece. Okay, here we go, the second eyeball. Yep, it's cute. And she did a great job, perfect job of getting those eyes equidistant from the nose. Yeah, I say we give her, the whole team, a round of applause. They've been doing great getting this assembled. That's one of the trickiest things, is getting those eyes, you know, pretty even, pretty uniform. It's the same thing if we make something with handles. If we put 2 handles on, the first handle, I mean, it's a complicated or tricky, challenging process to put a handle on a vase. But if you put 2 handles on, the second one's got to match, and you want it to line up. You want it to be in, you know, on the same plane. So, same thing when you start adding sculptural components or eyeballs. You want to be pretty close too. I think this hedgehog on the pipe, I think it's a little bit bigger than the hedgehog that's here on the table in the shop. I think it's a little bit bigger. Though I will say that pieces, when they're on the pipe, they always seem bigger than the next morning when you open up the furnace. You're like, oh, I thought that was bigger. And I think that usually that just has to do with, like, gosh, that was pretty labor intensive. I thought that you get done with the piece and you're like, I'm tired. And the next day, well, I felt pretty tired. I thought it was going to be bigger than this. But I'm not doing any of the hard, heavy lifting, so I think it is actually bigger. So what do we got now? Oh, now we got an ear. Cute little ear. So this part, now that those components, you see how they're pre-made, this part really goes quite quickly to assemble everything together. Anybody have any questions here? Anybody wondering anything? I've answered everything you've ever wondered about glass. Success. Yeah, any more names? Yeah, how many prototypes does it take to get to the final design? That's a good question. I'll have to ask. I'll do that after this next ear goes on. I want to break the concentration. But that's a good question. Again, you know how I was talking about, we kind of do sketching in clear glass. I'm sure that there are probably some test runs in clear glass, and also probably smaller scale as well before ramping up to this size hedgehog. I think that's typically how most glass makers will go about a process, is they'll sort of build up before they make something really big. They'll test techniques, they'll test color application, things like that. So she said there was a team of 4. They spent 2 days, 14-hour days, working through the process. So I think there were at least 4, I think is what she said. So a lot, yeah. And that's also part of that investment, right? Of you have to run your shop. You're using the glass. You're paying your assistants. So that's part of what makes glass really add up too. But also, that's still pretty good. That's still pretty quick. To go from conception to like a finished piece that you're really satisfied with, that's pretty good. But the thing about being a glassblower as well, and that I've found with glassblowers, is that we're never really satisfied. There's always something, I think a lot of artists and makers will be that way, is every time you make something, you're happy with it, and then you make it a little bit more, and you start to get better at the process, and you can do it faster and more efficiently. Then you look at some of the earlier ones, and you're like, oh, that part's not as good. Or you're like, that part's not as good. I can do this differently next time. This would be faster. So it's a lot of troubleshooting and problem solving in glass making too. So a lot of creative thinking. But I find as well that I think glassblowing for that reason attracts kind of a certain type of person, maybe glutton for punishment, because the first years of glass making, you break so much stuff, or you don't have success. So you've got to be really adamant and persistent to stick with it until you do start making things successfully. But then you can get really good, and you can still have bad days. I know that I broke a piece yesterday. I think I broke 2 pieces yesterday. And then I was thinking about it. I hadn't broken anything for like a month. That's pretty good. Not break anything for a month. You break 2 things in a day. You're like, so frustrating. You just hope that it's maybe just one bad day and not like a bad week. Especially here when we do demonstrations in front of a bunch of people. Though usually it makes a good show if something breaks too. It's exciting, depending on how and when it breaks. I see your question, I'll come get it. Or maybe it's a name suggestion. Yeah. Yeah, how much would this hedgehog cost? I'll have to ask. We've got one probably similar in the shop. So if I can't find the answer, that's the easiest way. You can go to the shop and you can look. It's probably fairly expensive, I would guess. But yeah, I'll ask if Megan comes back. Megan is in charge of the shops. So I'll ask her if she knows. Oh, she's over there. I can ask her. But also, all of Megan's work, it's available on our website, CMOG Shops. $2,000 for a hedgehog like this. So, you might have to go to the piggy bank What's that? 20% off today? What a deal. 20% off today. So 20% off 2,000. There you go. That starts to make a dent.
Through the hole?
Yeah, yeah.
Have to mow some lawns.
You might need the other one when you got two legs. You can repair it.
But there are smaller animals that she makes too. So there's a wide price point for everyone. Did we get another leg on there? Or a leg on there? I missed it. Yep, we got a leg. Yeah, anything else? Any other questions? You've all been great, hanging out for the whole demonstration. That's really wonderful. We really appreciate that. It's exciting for us to get into summer and get into having a lot more visiting artists and guest artists. It's always fun for us to get to work with other glass makers, see their process, see their techniques, because again, as glass blowers, we're watching how this gets assembled, and we're always making little mental notes. Like, oh, that was a clever thing to do. That's an interesting way to do that. Because there are a lot of ways to do different processes, and everyone makes things differently. And it's really about understanding how and why people do things and kind of building a toolbox. You build a toolbox of techniques and you test them out for yourself and you figure out if it works better for you than maybe a different way. So it's always great to watch other glass makers. There's a lot of communication back and forth between the team, so they know when they're ready. Outside of this, this part requires a lot of communication, a lot of talking and timing, but outside of, assembling, it's been not a ton of communication. And again, that's because they work together a lot, so they know the steps, they know the process. They don't have to talk about every little step of the process, every little step of the way. But when they were prototyping, I'm sure it was much more communication and much more like, oh, what if we do this next time? And how about we try this? And maybe this order would be better. That's something to think about. If you put those legs on before you put all the spikes on, those legs are tricky to keep hot because they're smaller, so they're going to cool off faster. So you put all those spikes on, and then you put on these small pieces, so you don't have to be so worried about those cooling quickly and cracking and breaking. So that's part of the order over there on the drawing. We're going to do this part first, and then we'll do the spikes, and then we'll do the eyes. Or at least I think that's what it says. It's in French, but I'm pretty sure that's what it said. Was the steps.
It's easier to see the space.
So every time you watch Charlie, every time he comes back to the bench and every time he goes to the glory hole, the reheating furnace there, we're on that sliding yoke, so he rolls the glass back pretty far. And then when he sets this down, gently he sets that piece down. He sets the pipe down on the yoke and on the rail of the bench. That's just to prevent that shock. You don't want to set that down really hard. You don't want to risk that piece falling off. You don't want to have stress travel as a vibration through the pipe into that constriction that they made earlier. So being very delicate about how they move with the pipe. You'll also notice that we think a lot about how we can sort of leverage our body and move that weight around, not picking this up way up by our chest, keeping it really low, kind of by the hips, so that we can brace with our hips, and really lift with our legs, and we move a lot of glass around like that. So a lot of technique. There are people that, they're really just well known for making big glass, or they'll be hired to help people make big glass because they can turn a lot of material. They're very strong. But you don't even necessarily have to be super, super strong. A lot of it is still just knowing how to use your body and how you can move the pipe in a really smart way. A lot of tall glass makers, they can pick up big, heavy things because they're tall, so they can get one hand on the back of the pipe and they can kind of push down and use their own arm, their own hand, sort of like a fulcrum point. So I see a lot of tall glass makers that can move a lot of heavy material around. I always try to not be the guy that moves a lot of heavy material around. I'll open the door. I'll talk about it. Yeah. So we got 3 little hedgehog legs. Were there any last names that I didn't get? Yes. Oh, so they are called quills. I was right earlier. I said I thought they were called quills. So I said no. Quilson. I love it. Quilson. Amanda, will you write Quilson? Thanks. Yes. Humphrey? Amanda, we also need to add Humphrey to the list. The alliterations, they're always good. Humphrey the Hedgehog. So here we go, the last leg going on. There we go. 4 legs, the eyes, the ears. I say we give him a round of applause. I think that's all the assembling now. This is looking fantastic. So they'll probably just make some final adjustments. But the last step for this, it does have to be slowly cooled. So I was talking about earlier, if glass cools too quickly, it can crack and break, it will shrink, it will contract. So this will go into an oven called the annealer, and we will anneal the glass. We'll slowly cool this. And the cooling time, that's dependent upon the thickness of the glass. So if we make, during the day we make pitchers and bowls, vases, we can usually cool those in 8 or 10 hours. We can usually cool them pretty quickly because they're thin, so they cool fast. But a thicker piece like this, and where we have different thicknesses and we have these connection points, we want to cool that over a longer period of time. Those thicker areas, the glass in the center, it's not going to cool as fast as the glass on the outside. So our goal is that we cool this all really evenly and uniformly at all of those different thicknesses and all those different connection points. So this will go into a 900-degree oven, and it will be cooled. It will be annealed. And that annealing time, we'll ask Kat what she prefers, but we have basically preset programs for our annealing ovens. So at the end of the day, we can say, I want to cool this for 8 hours or 12 hours, 16 hours, 24 hours. I think we have one that's 36 hours as well. So if we make something that's really thick, we've got plenty of time that we can cool it down. So that will be the last step for this. So we kind of ramp up into the break off and the annealing. But they just set the piece onto the marver, that table in the center of the studio there. They set the piece on the marver, and that was, I mentioned it at the very beginning, making sure that all 4 legs will touch, and this will sit evenly without wobbling. So they placed it on the steel table. But before they did that, they had to make sure that it was warm enough that those legs would move a little bit so that they could kind of push them into place. And then the final thing they're going to do, when they break the glass free from the blowpipe, there's going to be a hole left behind. But they're going to cover that hole with one more spike, one more quill on the back. So they'll have that prepared and ready to go. But they want to crimp that constriction down even further. So they want to make sure that it's a really small breaking point. So they've got that hot torch back on, and they're focusing the heat so that they can squeeze and constrict that point even narrower and even smaller, so that they don't have as big of a hole, as big of an opening to cover up with the final spike. So we have a little table set up over here. It's like a little fiber board table. But we can set the hedgehog on there, break it free, and then kind of hold on to it and make sure it's stable when they put that last spike on. And then it will be put into the 900-degree oven. So we also, earlier today, we turned on our annealing oven that was closest in proximity so that when we load this into the oven, we don't have to pick it up and carry it all the way across the studio over there. We can pick it up, take 5 steps, put it away into the oven, and then hopefully get the door closed safely. But there is a bit of a tradition in glass making, and that's that you don't applaud at the end until the piece is in the annealer and the doors are closed, because you don't want to jinx it. you don't want to trip on anything. We've got these vents here. That's air conditioning. Not a lot of glass studios have air conditioning, but we want you to be comfortable, so we have a great ventilation system. So since there was air conditioning, we need you to be comfortable. Of course, we also get to be pretty comfortable in the glass studio, so we'll probably put both of these down. In fact, I'm going to go shut off this side of air conditioning so we can close those. That way you don't worry about tripping on them when we get to putting this piece away. They are painted yellow on the side to help you see them, but I know I've still tripped on them. But they're really great. We've got these little vents that pop up all the way across the floor. So they're just building that temperature up and focusing the heat there. So when they use the torch, they focus a lot of heat there. Then they take a short heat. It's maintaining the temperature everywhere, but also it's going to increase the temperature in that one spot. The hottest thing into the reheating furnace, it's going to be the hottest thing back out of the reheating furnace. So it's good to do this just like a little bit at a time. We don't want to just blast it with that torch. It's nicer to sort of heat everything evenly. So David's squeezing pretty hard to tighten that constriction. So Jesse is turning pretty hard. You can only turn, or you can only squeeze as hard as you can turn fast. Does that make sense? If you're squeezing really hard, then it becomes harder to turn, and if you squeeze too hard, then suddenly you can't turn anymore. So again, that's a good time to have a team member to be turning the pipe for you, just because you can squeeze that down a little harder. So Charlie's getting started on a bit of glass. He's gathering. I assume that's going to be for that final quill to go across the tail, or to be kind of the tail. I've also heard some research said spines. These are called spines. I don't know. Maybe a mystery. We may never know. So you can see, when David stops turning, that whole hedgehog is moving a little bit. So that's good. That's a good sign. That will help them squeeze that constriction down even a little further. I think they might squeeze it down a little tighter. How's the balcony? Good spot. Yeah, that's a good spot. You got a really good straight-on view. You know, when we have visiting artists here, what tends to happen is all of the glass blowers will usually post up right in these spots, and we got a stage there, but a lot of times right above the furnace, right above the action, that's where a lot of glass blowers will sit, and that's just so that you can see all the action. It's really good if you're a glass blower to watch other glass blowers' hands. That's where you really learn a lot, is by watching the hands. You can watch the glass, that's the mesmerizing part, but the magic, the change, that's happening at the hands. So seeing how, David has his hands positioned, how he turns the pipe, those are all things that would be important to watch if you're trying to learn and understand maybe how to work bigger. Where do you position your body? How do you work in team like this? So a couple more spikes. How many are we at now? 16? All right. I'm glad you're keeping track. This just in. Most hedgehogs have 5,000 to 7,000 spikes, spines, quills, what have you, on their body.
So only on the table is going to be good.
This one is falling a little short at 20, but I don't think any of us are prepared to sit here for 5,000 to 7,000 more. That's a good hedgehog fact. Thanks, Amanda.
You don't need no platform. We're going to put it on the table. We're going to just break it on the table. Bring the last
The table is vermiculite. It's
Okay, okay.
There's cracks
There's
inside the
usually,
annealer.
usually you use
Bring it to the table, sit it on the table, break off one more spike, and then glove in.
exactly after it's in the annular.
Are you gonna put it in the?
Yeah.
Quand même, on va prendre quelque chose pour taper. Le jack là-bas. On va faire un genre de demi-tour de jack. J'ai besoin d'une boîte de jack.
So when this gets broken off, we're going to break it off on this table. And this is like a kiln shelf material. And this was right over where one of those air conditioning vents was popped up. And Jesse said that it was cold. And he put his hand on it. So just using the torch, he's going to torch it a little bit to warm that up. And it's got a wood frame. But if he burns the wood frame too much, that's okay, because Jesse is our technician. He can build a new one. So again, this is thinking ahead, getting all the tools ready. You can see you're going through the steps in her head, making sure everything is in order. Jesse's getting suited up. He put on a sweatshirt and a face shield and then some gloves. Again, he's going to catch this hedgehog. Jesse is animal control. He's going to catch a hedgehog. And you can tell he's serious with his safety equipment. Personal protective equipment. So those gloves, those will be able to allow him to grab onto the hedgehog. And Kat was saying, you need to be here, be ready to be on either side just to make sure if there's any kind of wobble, if anything happens, you can catch the hedgehog. He's also a hockey goalie, so I feel like we're trusting the right person for this. So they're talking through it. They're going to torch that area right where they break the glass off. Charlie will have that bit ready to bring it over.
So I'm just gonna do a jack line. After I go in there, we break it. Yep.
All right. So remember, we will applaud when it's safely in the annealing oven. They were chilling that constriction with some shears. The jacks are doing the same thing. A wood paddle should create that vibration, breaks off really nice. They're going to torch this, and then Charlie will come over with that final bit. So nice work there. Hands off the torch. Place on that last bit. Stretching it out. When they pull it, you can see they shaped it so that it would be nice and wide, so it would cover up that connection point. Cutting it at that point, cutting it at that angle. And then again, using the torch just to make sure there are no sharp edges. When we cut through glass, we sometimes get these sharp edges left behind. So we can use that torch, make sure that it's really clean. The door open. Jesse gets the hedgehog in there. Safe and sound. Adorable. How about a big round of applause? Incredible. Kat Labonté, Charlie, David, Jesse, Katie, Alexis, Brad, Jason in the booth, Amanda on the live stream. Incredible job, incredible teamwork. I see you give them one more big round of applause. A beautiful hedgehog. It's so cute, so adorable. It's so fun. And remember, if you are curious in owning your own little Kat Labonté critter, those are available in the shop. They're also available online on the store. And we want to thank you, of course, for sticking around, joining us, and watching that hedgehog come to life, and spending your day with us here at the Corning Museum of Glass, in person and online. But that's going to wrap it up for us for the evening. Thank you so much. Have a great night. So long, folks.